While looking into the possibility that It's a Wonderful Life was communist propaganda, the FBI failed to notice the most disturbing aspect: the sequence in which George's automobile autonomously drives between scenes. Our list of the most shocking errors in this holiday classic will alter your viewing experience, from pipes that mysteriously vanish to magic wreaths. Your mind will be blown by how anyone could have missed the last one. It's that apparent. Hollywood wasn't even aware of It's a Wonderful Life till its plot was already well underway. Historian and writer Philip Van Doren Stern penned the short tale The Greatest Gift in November of 1939. It told the story of George Pratt, a man who, on Christmas Eve, was going to take his own life while standing on a bridge. An enigmatic stranger materialized just as he was about to leap, offering him a glimpse into a world in which he had never been. Everything was altered by George's vision. It hit him how much of an impact he had made on people's lives. No publisher was interested, despite Stern's belief in the narrative. He chose to print 200 copies on his own in 1943 after years of rejection. He considered selling them, but ultimately decided to send them as holiday greetings instead. An agent got their hands on one of the cards and took it to Hollywood. In an effort to adapt it into a picture starring Cary Grant, RKO Pictures forked out $10,000 for the rights. But it wasn't working. Many scripts were created, but none of them managed to convey Stern's narrative in its entirety. After much deliberation, RKO ultimately opted to sell the rights in late 1945. Frank Capra intervened at that point. After serving his country in World War II, he was seeking a meaningful cause to work on after his return. For the same $10,000 that RKO had paid, he acquired the rights and understood straight away who should play the lead. A renowned combat pilot named James Stewart was similarly looking for a meaningful employment after returning from duty. For Capra, this was more than simply another picture. His work for the United States government included directing propaganda films throughout the war. Why We Fight was the Army's motto. Because of that, he transformed. His goal upon his return to Hollywood was to create films that moved audiences. As a result, he established Liberty Films in 1945 alongside other filmmakers William Wyler and George Stevens so that they could work independently of studio influence. Their debut feature film was It's a Wonderful Life. Producing the picture, however, was no picnic. As a young company, Liberty Films took a huge risk by investing in a major production. Bank of America loaned them $1.54 million, but the interest and fees soon added up to $3.78 million. Capra had faith in the story, so he took a risk with a studio that had never released a picture before. The real-life experiences of James Stewart during World War II influenced his portrayal of George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. He flew 20 combat flights over Nazi-occupied Europe as a B-24 bomber pilot, becoming the first big Hollywood actor to join the military following Pearl Harbor. The impact of the conflict on him is evident in his performance. George begins with high hopes, envisioning a life away from Bedford Falls. However, as his obligations mount, he finds himself overwhelmed by irritation and tiredness. Stewart doesn't merely act when he reaches the bridge, pondering suicide. Like a man about to lose it, he is feeling overwhelmed. Many soldiers felt the same way after returning home, and his performance was an emotional roller coaster. Played by Donna Reed, Mary Hatch is an interesting character in her own right. She is the rock that keeps the family together when things go tough, and she recognizes George's potential before he does. Reed granted Mary autonomy and strength during an era when women's roles were frequently simplistic. After her time on the Donna Reed show ended, she became a household name off-screen. Still, she showed her acting chops in this part. Among the all-time great villains in film is Mr. Potter, played by Lionel Barrymore. He personifies corruption and avarice because he is heartless and merciless. Potter grabs $8,000 from Uncle Billy without hesitation, almost pushing George to death. Barrymore amplified Potter's menace by playing up his physical limitations. He is wheelchair-bound owing to arthritis. As George's guardian angel, Henry Travers Clarence is funny and kind. His generosity, albeit lacking in wisdom and might, never wavers. George learns his value by being shown a world in which he was never born. He closes by saying that having friends makes a guy successful even if he fails. Basically says what the film is trying to say. A significant advancement in cinema effects was made possible by the difficulty of making the snow in It's a Wonderful Life appear realistic. Most films in 1946 utilized bleached cornflakes as their snow. Despite their charming on-screen persona, they caused a major issue. It was hard to capture conversation since the performers' every stride produced an audible crunch. Moreover, they had no characteristics typical of actual snow. Zero traces of footsteps or wheel tracks. The film's director, Frank Capra, sought advice from special effects artist Russell Shearman after realizing this wouldn't cut it. The effects crew at RKO and Shearman came up with an entirely original idea. They substituted foamite, which is often found in fire extinguishers, for cornflakes. It was made into sprayable fake snow by combining it with soap flakes, water, and sugar. It was like a silent, natural snowfall, thanks to the large fans that helped distribute it. Actors could now perform under falling snow without having to rehearse their lines afterwards. In 1948, the Motion Picture Academy bestowed a special award for this groundbreaking achievement for its immense significance. However, there were issues specific to this spring snowfall. Parts of the set became hazardous due to the soap-based combination making the ground extremely slick. Members of the crew had to be extra cautious so nothing bad would happen. This obstacle did not prevent the innovation from becoming a paradigm shifter. It changed the way movies depicted winter and had an impact on cinematic methods for decades. Filming occurred during a scorching summer, despite the best efforts to stage it in a wintry environment. California was experiencing a heat wave while filming It's a Wonderful Life took place. Extreme heat reached far above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, or 32 degrees Celsius, at RKO's Encino Ranch. It was too hot to tolerate. Actor James Stewart, who portrayed George Bailey, perspired profusely in many sequences, most notably while having an emotional breakdown on the bridge. The heat unintentionally amplified the intensity and rawness of his performance. Director Frank Capra halted filming for a day because of the extreme weather. The actors and crew were completely drained. The already challenging task of filming a holiday film during the summer was rendered much more so by the extreme heat. Capra was still adamant about realizing his dream, so he continued on. Stewart had nearly bowed out of the position altogether. He doubted his desire to continue performing upon his return from World War II. The actor who portrayed Potter, Lionel Barrymore, was the one who persuaded him to perform the role. Stewart subsequently said that, looking back on his six-decade career, his favorite film was It's a Wonderful Life. Capra commissioned the construction of a whole set to give Bedford Falls the appearance of a genuine town. The building process lasted about 2 months. The Encino Ranch of RKO, an area of 4 acres in size. The over 70 buildings were meticulously built to exude an air of lived-in charm, down to the weathered storefronts and individual residences. 3 city blocks worth of space was occupied by the main street, which extended 300 yards. 20 mature oak trees were brought onto the land to create a tree-lined promenade and a manufacturing zone for the set. It ranks high among the most elaborate and expansive sets ever constructed for an American film. Capra aimed for a sense of decades-old Bedford Falls to heighten the realism. A lot of work went into making the structures seem old and worn. The hamlet came to life thanks to details like weathered sidewalks, vintage signage, and the cozy atmosphere of a small town. It was worthwhile. Viewers of It's a Wonderful Life had the impression that Bedford Falls was a genuine, believable setting. However, the settlement was short-lived. Developers purchased the Encino Ranch from RKO in the 1950s. To build more homes, the Bedford Falls set was mostly leveled. 2 sites from the film are all that are visible now. There is still the swimming pool at Beverly Hills High School that was used in the iconic dance scene. Also, La Cagnata Flintridge is still home to Martini's mansion. Every other item has vanished. I wish it were that easy. Has some hiccups, but then again, so do all movies. Heartwarming moments abound in this 1946 holiday classic. On the other hand, certain unexpected blunders can be discovered with careful inspection. Some are humorous, while others were just lucky enough to make the cut. Not all of them are logical either. The Charleston Dance Contest has one of the most hilarious gaffes. In the midst of all the action, George Bailey and Mary Hatch fail to see that the gym floor is going to open underneath them. People are already falling into the secret pool, adding to the chaos. However, the majority of viewers fail to see something. James Stewart's toupee momentarily falls out of place when he emerges from the water. Stewart began to depend on hairpieces to preserve his leading man appearance by the time he was in his late 30s, about 1946. The toupee couldn't handle the combination of the damp hair and the abrupt change in position. Additionally, his actual hairline is briefly seen. There is a lot going on in the scene, though, so nobody notices the error. It was said that director Frank Capra would overlook minor flaws in a scene if they contributed to its dramatic impact. Plus, this one managed to remain embedded. Next, there's the infamous Uncle Billy blunder, which resulted in an unanticipated financial windfall. George and Uncle Billy have just finished talking when this scenario begins. Outside the screen, there is a resounding crash as Uncle Billy clumsily stumbles away. Unanticipated noise was produced. There was a tremendous commotion because one of the crew members had inadvertently knocked over some props. Thomas Mitchell, who portrayed Uncle Billy, responded immediately instead of straying from his role. "I am fine," he mumbled. "No worries," I continued on my way. The statement was a perfect match for his character, so Capra decided to keep it. He was so satisfied by how effortless it was that he awarded the crew member at fault a bonus of $10, which is equivalent to almost $150 in today's money. This delightful coincidence further enhanced Uncle Billy's endearing persona and demonstrated that occasionally the most memorable moments in cinema occur via pure serendipity. Some of the film's blunders weren't as funny. Like the pipe that mysteriously vanished, some were merely peculiar. George Bailey and Violet Bick are having a conversation in the building and loan office in one scene. He has a pipe in his mouth and is listening to her. He goes to grab some cash to offer her, but the pipe vanishes. Gone without a trace, no explanation, no transition. This kind of continuity mistake was common in older films due to the fact that sequences were frequently shot at various periods and occasionally in the wrong sequence. The error likely went unnoticed during editing because someone neglected to reassign the pipe to Stewart on set. It may be insignificant, but it will be impossible to ignore once you see it. Next, there's the illogical ice cream. Despite Mary Hatch's earlier protests, young George Bailey brings her an ice cream dish garnished with coconut early in the film. What follows is more odd, but that is already entertaining. The fact that George's errand takes more than an hour is verified by a phone call from Mr. Gower. Still, upon his return, Mary's still seated at the counter, her ice cream appearing identical. A flawlessly frozen scoop, no melting, no pooling. This oversight likely occurred due to the fact that different sequences were shot independently and no one considered replacing the solid ice cream with melting ice cream. There wasn't nearly as much focus on continuity monitoring in 1946 as there is now. As a result, things like these occasionally went unnoticed. However, it serves as a humorous reminder that even cult classics have their eccentricities for today's audiences. Furthermore, an eerie figure materializes in the backdrop as George Bailey anxiously meets with Mr. Potter. As George hunches over Potter's desk, a sleek, chrome-doored contemporary automobile can be seen out through the window. This wouldn't normally be a problem in a film, but the time period of It's a Wonderful Life spans the 1910s and 1940s. Such features were uncommon on chrome-plated automobiles until the late 1940s or early 1950s, therefore it was a glaring error. The video brilliantly depicts Bedford Falls and its inhabitants. From the clothing to the props, every detail is spot-on in terms of capturing the era. The village was designed to resemble small-town America from decades past by director Frank Capra. The vehicle managed to squeeze inside the frame, though, dispelling the illusion for all observers. It was probably parked on a roadway that was used for outside shoots or close to the studio lot. When filming in semi-public settings in particular, filmmakers lacked complete control over every component of the background. For a long time, nobody spotted this error, but now it's a favorite among detail-oriented enthusiasts. It doesn't detract from the situation, but rather enhances it in an unexpected way. It is ironic, in a sense. A futuristic vehicle waits outside George's window while he begs for another opportunity, as if to show him that the passage of time never stops. Unfortunately, the film ends on a somewhat different note. With a Christmas wreath slung over his arm, George hurries into the building and loan office. He sets it down on a table and then picks up the phone. However, in the subsequent frame, it appears to be perfectly still on his arm. Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody ever returns it. Once more, it appears. This kind of continuity mistake occurs frequently in movies, particularly when sequences are shot in a non-linear fashion. It's conceivable that this was a retake and someone misplaced the wreath. This kind of editing error is common, but it seems particularly appropriate in this case. To the point where some admirers make light of Clarence's The unexpected return of the wreath was orchestrated by George's guardian angel. Moving a Christmas wreath is meaningless if he can turn back the clock. One of the most dramatic sequences also included another slip-up. George loses it with his family because he is so stressed out. Out of irritation, he stomps on objects, squawks, and touzles his hair. This scene really drives home the amount of stress he's under. However, in the subsequent photo, his hair is tidy and styled as if nothing had transpired. The use of several takes to assemble together the scenario probably contributed to this error. Actors frequently get their hair and cosmetics touched up in between takes. Someone, nevertheless, overcorrected in this instance. It's subtle, but it adds an unexpected laugh for anyone that notice. Just a moment. George seems utterly untidy. Next thing you know, he'll seem as fresh out of the barbershop. However, it remains in the background of the scene. The challenge of maintaining flawless continuity, particularly during high-energy scenes, is highlighted, if anything, by this. Furthermore, it enhances the film's allure. Who among us wouldn't wish our troubles to vanish as gracefully as George's disheveled locks? At Mr. Gower's pharmacy, you'll see one of the most understated bloopers early on. In a tender moment that foreshadows their future relationship, little Mary leans in to say something to young George. But there's an unauthorized item, a little piece of tape, on the countertop. There was no set for this. It served as a signpost to indicate to the performers precisely where they were to stand. Filmmakers frequently employ these to ensure that individuals achieve their goals. Seeking optimal illumination in viewpoints for the purpose of photography. Usually they are taken off before filming, but someone forgot to do that with this one. Correcting such errors was not a simple task in 1946, when It's a Wonderful Life was composed. Reshooting a whole scene was necessary to repair an error, in contrast to today's computerized techniques that can delete minute elements. The tape marker was left in the finished product. Provides an unusual look at the making of the golden age of Hollywood. One of the most glaring continuity mistakes in It's a Wonderful Life occurs during George Bailey's accident scene. He smashes his vehicle into a tree close to Martini's house after everything goes wrong for him. Upon first glance, the vehicle appears to have collided with a tree, although both headlights remain unbroken. But then something shifts in the subsequent images. A headlight has gone out as the vehicle has slid to the side a little. When you see it, the error jumps out at you. Even though George is already at his lowest moment in this dramatic sequence, the moving automobile ruins everything and makes you question how it got by editing. Reshoots or technological issues on site may have caused this, according to some. There has been no formal statement on the matter. However, the circumstances of the shoot could have been a factor. In the summer of 1946, when this image was shot, the temperature reached 90 degrees. Using a combination of foamite, soap flakes, water, and sugar to generate fake snow, the production crew had to create a winter environment despite the heat. The Academy bestowed its technical prize to this method because of its exceptional level of development. However, it was difficult to work in such an environment. This and other minor continuity issues may have been caused by the high temperatures and difficulties of working with fake snow. The film continues to be beloved by fans despite its flaws. Rather than detracting from the experience, these minor mistakes bring personality. A lot of people think of them as artifacts from the days when movies didn't use computer editing but rather genuine sets and realistic effects. One of the most intense passages in the film has yet another oversight. As a result, George feels compelled to save Clarence from the frigid water. Clarence cries out for rescue as George swims over to him, but something seems wrong. As the screams reach his ears, he keeps his jaw shut. Although the scene is meant to be solemn, the music and pictures are completely out of sync, creating an unsettling atmosphere. It was an error, probably occurred due to the nature of sound recording in 1946. Due to the unreliability of live audio, particularly in wet or outdoor environments, actors would frequently record their lines in a studio afterwards. Even though they weren't precisely synced with his lip movements, Clarence's cries were likely added in post-production. Although it's a little slip-up, it becomes more apparent at this pivotal juncture. The vast majority of viewers are seldom bothered by it since. One of the most adored characters is Clarence. Henry Travers gives a charming and humorous performance that makes the audience forget about the plot holes. The scenario itself isn't as intriguing as what's happening behind the scenes. It wasn't really snowing that much. A total of 6,000 liters of synthetic snow went into its creation. For snow, most movies at the period used painted cornflakes. Scenes with dialogue needed a quieter approach. The special effects crew altered the way winter scenes were shot in Hollywood by proposing a more subdued and realistic substitute. Harry Bailey's age is another odd discrepancy in the movie. In his depiction of a world without George, Clarence says that no one was around to prevent little Harry from drowning when he was a youngster. The author goes so far as to state that Harry's age at death was 9. However, the dates do not coincide when Harry's gravestone is shown on screen. His birth year is 1911 and his death year is 1919, which puts him at the tender age of 7 or 8. Many have argued over this error for a long time. Some think it was only a scripting mistake. Other people believe that Henry Travers could have accidentally mentioned his age on set and nobody noticed. The inconsistency in the figures is perplexing given the centrality of Harry's destiny to the plot. A few devoted followers have offered various interpretations. Even though he is an angel, Clarence may have some human frailties, according to one hypothesis. It's likely that he just misunderstood the age because he occasionally forgets. Some people say it's just a result of the way movies were created in that era. Due to the compressed timelines of the 1940s film industry, even little mistakes weren't always considered catastrophic. Many people consider It's a Wonderful Life to be the best Christmas film ever. In 1947, however, the FBI regarded it as something far more perilous. A suspected case of communist infiltration in Hollywood was tagged in an internal communication during the height of Cold War hysteria. For one thing, bankers were portrayed negatively in the film. A difficulty, according to the FBI, was the affluent and merciless banker named Mr. Potter. They took his depiction as a swipe at capitalism. The document claims that the communists utilized this strategy to sow seeds of disillusionment with American institutions. Opponents of free market saw George Bailey's modest community bank as a socialist alternative to Mr. Potter's avarice. The House Un-American Activities Committee, WAC, paid close attention to the worries. Actors and filmmakers were already blacklisted as the government clamped down on communist influence in Hollywood. However, WAC ultimately decided not to pursue an inquiry. Despite initial concerns, the film's themes of solidarity, charity, and resistance against corruption continue to resonate with audiences. There were other reasons than political issues that the picture caused a stir. The scene where George Bailey witnesses a parallel universe in which he is never born is one of the most talked about parts. His meek, unmarried librarian wife Mary lives in this alternate reality. As if her existence were meaningless without a spouse, the film portrays this as a tragic event. This scene is disturbing for a lot of contemporary viewers. The assumption that a wife and children are necessary for a woman's fulfillment is perpetuated. There were previous cinematic adaptations of the spinster librarian theme. A reserved and lonely woman who keeps to herself. Here, it implies that Mary's existence is meaningless apart from George. The goal of the scenario, according to others, isn't this. They take it as a chance to show how intertwined George and Mary's lives really are. The point is not to imply that Mary has no value apart from her husband, but rather to demonstrate the transformative power of love. Their marriage isn't enough to acknowledge Mary's selflessness, though. She is George's rock in times of trouble, helps out with the rescue of the Bailey building and loan, and takes care of their children. But the plot is relentless in its focus on George's problems, and Mary is expected to play the part without reservation. An even more fundamental question is posed by the film, transcending politics and gender norms. To what extent is it possible to define a life well lived? George Bailey gives up on his aspirations throughout the most of the film. He aspires to become an architect, tour the world, and construct towering structures. On the contrary, he remains in Bedford Falls, where he assists people while also running the family company. On Christmas Eve, when he feels confined and thinks his life has been in vain, he experiences his lowest point. His situation remains unchanged, even with his epiphany at the conclusion. His aspirations remain unfulfilled. All he has to do is find a different perspective on his sacrifices. Some think there's a bittersweet message in the picture. It implies that being happy isn't about getting what you want out of life, but rather about helping other people. Philosophers have connected this concept to objective list theories, which state that material achievement isn't the source of happiness but rather interpersonal connections and a sense of belonging to a larger community. If this is the case, then George has had a meaningful life. He is loved by all around him, helps his village, and rescues families from financial catastrophe. Contrarily, some perceive a message that is more nuanced. They contend that the film similarly foreshadows societal pressures to forego one's aspirations in favor of one's societal obligations. Does George's genuine happiness stem from his doing what's right? Though genuine, his happiness at the end stems from embracing his part rather than making a life-altering decision. In 1946, It's a Wonderful Life had a very low opening weekend. Only $3.3 million was the film's global gross. Only $3.18 million went into it. Marketing and distribution expenses were not even accounted for in that figure. It cost more than $1.5 million, borrowed from the production firm Liberty Films that Frank Capra had formed. After the film's box office bombed in 1947, the studio was compelled to sell to Paramount Pictures. Due in large part to poor timing, it was a flop. The Best Years of Our Lives had already been released to theaters a short time ago. William Wyler directed the film, which followed returning soldiers as they readjusted to civilian life. The picture won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, after connecting with moviegoers. Although movie received 5 nominations, movie's A Wonderful Life was only nominated for its inventive use of synthetic snow. The themes of sacrifice and adversity in the picture failed to captivate people in post-war America, aside from the competition. Lots of folks were looking for something upbeat, anything to take their minds off of things. Not even the critics could decide how to evaluate it. For some, it was an uplifting message, but for others, it was overly emotional. Because they thought its small-town cheerfulness was illusory, they dubbed it Capricorn. Although James Stewart was lauded for his portrayal of George Bailey, the actor himself acknowledged afterwards that the film's message could have been too weighty for a country still reeling from the effects of war. Rather from receiving the enthusiastic welcome that Capra had anticipated, It's a Lovely Life became unnoticed. The picture did succeed in one important way, though. Making cinematic snow look genuine has been a challenge for Hollywood for a long time. Despite their widespread usage in filmmaking, painted cornflakes were notoriously loud and crumbled underfoot, making it nearly impossible to capture actors' voices. A combination of sugar, water, and fire extinguisher foam was the innovative approach created by Capra's team. On set, everything was quiet and looked authentic. Because of this innovation, the film was nominated for a Technical Achievement Oscar. The end came for Capra when It's a Wonderful Life bombed. After this, he only directed 5 more films, despite being a highly esteemed filmmaker in Hollywood. His early work was more successful than any of them. It looked like nobody would ever remember It's a Wonderful Life. Then, after almost 3 decades, everything shifted. The picture lost its copyright in 1974 due to a mistake made by an administrative official. All of a sudden, it could be shown for free by any TV station. Radio and television stations seized the opportunity to fill airtime with a professionally produced film at no expense to themselves. Every December throughout the 70s and 80s, TV viewers could see It's a Wonderful Life. Its hopeful message drew in those who had never seen it previously. It was a Christmas ritual for many families. The film's themes of perseverance and camaraderie gained fresh significance throughout America's economic and cultural crises. The beloved holiday classic It's a Wonderful Life was licensed to NBC in 1992 due to its immense popularity. The film's inspiration came from the short tale The Greatest Gift, and Republic Pictures had restored some copyright protections. From that point on, it has been airing continuously on Christmas Eve on NBC. Despite its rocky beginnings, this holiday classic has become a treasured classic. Its comeback caught even Capra off guard. The picture, he once remarked, is now living on its own. Upon first encounter, I failed to recognize it as a holiday tale.